Hey, how are you?
I think it's time. It's time. Tonight, we've got Dan Goodwin, Don Fisher, and Supervisor Krupski. I almost said Russell. And we're going to talk about the emergency management program. Next month, we're going to have a meeting about zoning, and it's going to be, at some point in the meeting, they're going to break us down into work groups, round tables, and it's actually our opportunity as individuals to contribute something to the future of what Southold looks like. So I think that would be a good meeting. And that probably will be held in the library because we're really expecting more people than can be accommodated here. But we'll confirm that with everybody. Also, another update, just today, I got a letter sent to me about the Love Lane corner. And it's from the DOT to the town. It's okay if I tell them that.
I'm not sure. What you gonna say?
Basically, it says what the DOT is willing to do at the Love Lane corner. And it's coming up, here it is. One more click. They did a very thorough examination of the site. They came here and they did a crash analysis and volume counts, and they were very thorough. And the crash analysis was inconclusive in terms of what was causing the crashes, but this is what they're prepared to do. They're going to make the existing stop sign coming out of the Love Lane a little bit more obvious. They're going to put a red reflective strip on it. They're going to change the no U-turn sign and give it its own standard. And they're going to repaint all of the striping that leads into the intersection coming westward along the main road so that you can go straight through to Old Sound Avenue. They did not say anything about adding a stop sign for that westbound traffic that wants to go either make a right turn at Love Lane or keep going through to Old Sound Avenue. And this would be done during the 2024 construction season for the DOT. I don't know when that is, but that's the update on that. So without any further ado, we're going to start out with Dan Goodwin, and please welcome our panel.
Just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out. Mattituck Laurel Civic is definitely a very engaged group, which I think is really nice to see. It seems like some of the eastern hamlets are kind of emulating what you guys have done here on the west end, which is really nice. It's always great to kind of get everybody on the same consensus and talking. I think it's one of the things that really makes our town in general a really special place. I see Charlie at least once a month, sit on the Transportation Commission with him. So we're in pretty regular communication about some of the things that are brought up at this meeting, which is really great. Get a lot of phone calls into the highway department, and a lot of the phone calls are sort of, who do I get in touch with for X problem or Y problem? So I kind of want to use this as a little bit of an opportunity to talk about what we do exactly in the highway department. Obviously, the phone is always there. If you have a question, I'm more than happy to help you out. If I can't help you directly, to get you to the person that can help you. So highway department on the whole, I was elected in 2021. This is going into my third full year of a 4-year term. Been working on changing some of the processes and the mechanisms in which we handle work and the workflow in general, but staying with the basics and the routine maintenance that just needs to continually be done to maintain our roads. So on the whole, the town has just over 400 lane miles of road in town. We have about 10 miles on Fisher's Island that we maintain as well. We have about 32 miles of sidewalk in our network. Now, the interesting thing about the sidewalk is the vast majority, about 70% of it, is along State Route 25. So New York State was kind enough years ago to grant us the basically possession without the ownership of their sidewalks. That includes maintenance, whatever that term may mean. So we have a pretty good sizable sidewalk network in relation to our town, partially due to just the way we are laid out. We're a very long township, so there's a lot of duplicated sidewalk on 25, so that number is a little bit more elevated when you look at the size of our sidewalk network in comparison to some of our larger towns that are our neighbors. Highway Department has 35 employees, including myself and my deputy, 3 of which are full-time on Fisher's Island. They range anywhere from heavy equipment operators, automotive equipment operators, maintenance mechanics, mechanics in our mechanic shop, a fabricator, all the way down to our administrative office staff. Our budget, including our payroll, our road paving program, is right around an $8 million annual budget. So it's a sizable chunk of the overall town budget, obviously. So we have a lot. We take care of a lot with, pretty tight resources, but it's good. We get it done.
Sorry.
So some of the major tasks, the things that people really kind of maybe think about when they think, oh, the highway department, what do you guys do? Obviously this time of year, if it's snowing, we're doing snow and ice control. Something that's a lot of people don't necessarily think about is we do not need to have snow to be doing ice control on the roads. We could have rain during the day at 45 degrees. As soon as that temperature drops below the magic number of 32, all bets are off. If there's puddles on the road, there may be residual moisture on the road. You could have a wet, dewy day, and we're out there. So in order to do that, we have 12 sanding routes on the mainland and 24 plow routes on the mainland. So these are important things to kind of think about. So we have 12 people out there that are taking care of 400 lane miles of road, with the minus the 10 that are on Fisher's Island. It takes us approximately 4 hours to treat the town from start to finish. The same with plowing. We have 24 plow routes. Now you may say, well, you have twice the amount of people out there doing the work. What takes you so long? Plowing is not as quick as sanding. Sanding, you can make one pass down the road and treat both lanes at the same time. Plowing, it's multiple passes. Depending on the storm, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. We can't be everywhere all the time is where I'm going with this. A lot of times we'll get a call in the middle of a snowstorm when somebody will say, I haven't seen a plow in 45 minutes. You're doing pretty good. Those plows work on a rotating, revolving basis, so they're gonna hit their main thoroughfares, and then in a ascending or descending order, they'll hit their neighborhood road every loop that they do. The idea is that we keep those main roads open so that if emergency services need to get out there in the event of something, they can get to that neighborhood at least. The important number here is when the snow has stopped, it takes 4 to 6 hours to clear the roads curb to curb after that point. A lot of people, they see that last snowflake's fallen and they gotta go out to get that cup of coffee or whatever it may be, and you hear the roads are a mess, this is ridiculous. At that point, the department's been on the job for 12, 18 hours maybe at this point, fighting this storm, however long it's been on us. A little bit of patience is key, that's kind of where I'm going with this. So the next big line item people might think of, paving. So this year, we're gonna be right in about a $1.5 to $1.6 million paving budget. The bulk of that budget actually comes to us in the form of state aid from New York State through various programs. Those programs are driven by the amount of road that we have in our network. So with regards to this, we obviously have inflationary costs that we deal with raw materials like asphalt. We go out to bid on these. They're affected drastically by particularly cost of fuel, not only because of asphalt being a tar-related project, but also the raw materials that go in to generate it are mined. So there's fuel costs, that indirect fuel cost to production asphalt. This is something that my first year in office, all the townships in the area, including ourselves, we saw about a 25% increase in road paving costs. So the budget didn't increase 25%, cost did. So that just means you get 25% less road taken care of. That's something that we're actually working with as a group of superintendents locally to try to lobby New York State to help us out, to help ease those burdens on ourselves. As far as road paving, I've restructured the program that when we pave a road, we're looking at the entire road. We're not just looking at a shiny new black surface on it. We're looking at, are there underlying base issues there? Are there drainage issues that need to be attended to? Are there drains there that have just failed and need to be replaced? And big one that I'll get into a little bit later is talking to our utility companies that install within our right-of-ways. Do they have any planned work coming down the line that we should be aware of? A road that we should hold off spending our money on because we can get into a pave agreement or something of that nature where they can help us with the cost of repaving the roads. Admittedly, this paving program slows the process down a little bit to get the roads paved, but it pays out huge on the back end because the roads will last far longer than they ever have. There's so many historical problems over the years that have just been attended to, not attended to, and the roads have been paved for one reason or another just to get it done. Lack of funding to fix the underlying problems. Fortunately, we're in a place where we have a very talented crew and we can fix a lot of these things in-house on our own. So it's just a matter of devoting the resources to do it. Another big key with the road repair, last year I was able to secure a piece of equipment that we have never had, known as a hot box. This allows us to transport hot asphalt from a material plant that might be as far as an hour away, let's say in Spionk in the wintertime, to allow us to do actual hot asphalt road repairs. So we're looking at doing repairs rather than patching. So if we have a tremendous reoccurring pothole, we'll actually come remove that road surface in that area, recompact it, fix it at the base level, and restore it the right way. The idea is to prevent that road from continuing to decay from that location outward and prevent those reoccurring potholes that you see all the time. We do still use cold patch. It's a necessity. Everybody has to. Asphalt availability in the winter is sporadic at best. So it's just a necessary evil, unfortunately. A big one that I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear more about, garbage removal at our road ends and our beaches. So the Highway Department and DPW, Department of Public Works, work together on this. This is a joint effort. So Highway Department has road end containers. They are typically red containers. DPW will have a green container, 55-gallon drum. So Bay Avenue, for example, is a highway road end. There's no official town beach or park at that. So we have about 50 locations during the peak of the season that we maintain. DPW has the same amount of receptacles. That route is 90 miles long, and during the height of the season, basically from a couple weeks before Memorial Day through typically Maritime Festival weekend, we run a garbage routine that's 5 times a week. That is the most that we can possibly do. It takes a full 8-hour shift to go through the garbage route that runs from Laurel to Orient Point. It's one of those things where certain receptacles are used and abused, and others are perfectly fine. There's no perfect answer to this problem. The best thing we can do is deal with it the best we can, clean it up, however long it takes us to clean it up. But 5 times a week in the summer, in the wintertime, we do go to a reduced schedule. We also do pull in some containers. We get a lot of questions about this. The reasoning behind that is some of them are just not used as frequently when there's less population out, obviously walking the beaches. And the other big thing is we deal with a lot of windy conditions coming in off of our waterways in the wintertime. And rather than having that trash just blow all over the place, it's better to just pull them in or reduce the amount of receptacles at a given location if it's a heavily used one. Another thing that we do here, roadside mowing, trimming for clearance. This is a major safety thing for pedestrians, bicyclists, even just other motorists, being able to see down the road of approaching vehicles. Fire departments require minimum clearances, bus companies with the oversized buses for the schools. So we have 3 what we call sidearm routes. That's the large tractor you guys might see out there that cuts sort of the banks and the ditches on the sides of the roads. And then we have 2 corner mowing routes. So in the height of the season, when we get going and everybody's grass is growing like crazy, the roadsides are no different. That first mowing, we've been getting out earlier and earlier and earlier. However, sometimes when you get rain, you have to take a day off because things are too wet, or it helps it grow faster, or whatever may happen. Those 3 routes, the sidearm tractor route takes 3 to 4 weeks for one cycle to be made. So as soon as that cycle is made, it's time to start back, again. Another one of those things where just kind of patience is the key. We are coming. We do deal with mechanical breakdowns also. These are machines. They can't just run 24/7. Tree work and removals. Prunings. So this is something that, I've been trying to keep a keen eye on. One of the first things I did when I took office was sort of review the work logs of the last few years to see where work had actually been done across town. It became very apparent that there were certain areas where manpower and work was definitely lacking in comparison to other areas of town. And when you went there, it was definitely it was very visible. This area in Mattituck, meaning the Conic Bay Boulevard corridor and up in the Captain Kidd area, was definitely one of those areas. So we did spend a fair amount of time out here sort of reestablishing width, reestablishing height, removing, damaged trees, dangerous trees. Don't get me wrong, there's still problem areas out there. However, this has been something that's been a big push during my time. And I've definitely seen the dividends pay off on it. We can have a big windstorm come through and we're not dealing with trees dropping and limbs dropping like we were at the rate, early on in my administration. So that's something that has been really, really, really important to our work progress. Along that line, just signage. So we get a lot of people, everybody's speeding, we need people to slow down. Part of the reason is signs weren't visible. So we went through, we kind of clearing signs where we need to, that's all part of that brush trimming. Adding additional signage. Conic Bay Boulevard was the test location for the radar signs that since grew across town. I think that's been a fairly successful, nice passive product that's worked pretty well. We've got a lot of good feedback on that one. So we install, maintain street name signs, parking signs, basically any sign that you see on the road there. Similarly, road painting and markings. So this is your line striping, these are your crosswalks, your stop bars, your parking stalls on one lane, things of that nature. We handle that in-house. Street sweeping, this is another big one. Street sweeping prior to my administration was basically an on-call service. If you wanted your road swept, you picked up the phone, you said, hey, my street's dirty. They would say, what's your address? They would send the street sweeper there, put the brooms down at your neighbor's house, drive past your house, pick the brooms up at your neighbor's house, and go to the next complaint. Put an end to that. So this is actually something that's part of our MS4 permit, which is a permit that we hold with New York State. And in our permit, we say that we clean our streets once annually at a minimum. This is something that we start in all of our sewer shed locations, our watershed locations, so anywhere where we have water that's near a surface water body where it may drain into there, we get in there and get those contaminants off the road at the end of the winter as soon as we can, and then work out from there, road by road, neighborhood by neighborhood. Once again, put this in order of magnitude, 400 lane miles, we have 2 street sweepers. Average speed of a street sweeper, 5 miles an hour. 3 to 4 passes per lane to get them clean. So not fast progress here. This is something that we start in April and we finish in October. It's quite an undertaking. You're talking a couple thousand yards of debris come off the road, literally one scrub brush at a time. Leading into that, stormwater maintenance. So this is, we've had a lot of rain. It's important for everybody to understand how our structures operate. We don't have massive sewer plants that pump all of our water out into the bays, thankfully. We're eliminating our outfall pipes, thankfully. What we have are networks of dry wells, recharge basins, leaching basins. Some of them are extremely antiquated, absolutely. Some of them need servicing, some of them need total replacement. So, this is another item that we have in our inventory, over 4,000. That number decreases as we install, but it also increases as we find some that haven't seen the light of day in possibly 20 or 30 years, or have additional structures that we didn't know of that are piped into things that we did know about. So 4,000 plus or minus is the number on that. All in varying states of repair. Some that need simple minor servicing, some that need total replacement. So we're coupling those issues that we find as we find ones that are in need of total repair with our new system install routine, which is tied into our road paving, which is tied into our sidewalk replacement. So in the last 2 years, we've installed 42 and 47. So right under 90 systems is what we've put in. That's about a 60% increase from what the pace was prior. We've put a big push on our stormwater systems here. Reason being for it, we've had a lot of flooding issues. We're eliminating outfalls across town. You know, this year we're planning that we will be zero discharge to Deep Hole Creek. So what does that mean for us? That means that any of our stormwater that's collected on our roads will no longer be going through a straight pipe directly into the creek. To me, that's a big deal. You know, we're looking at some other surface water bodies. We're going to be very, very close at attacking and getting to the other side of that on some other pretty major surface water bodies, as well as town. But we'll err on the side of caution on that one and say we're going to get that done this year. The thing that's great about this is we actually accomplish the work, so we have a lot of groups that are willing to give us grant money to do this. So this is money that's not coming directly out of taxpayers' pockets in Southold town. It's really a really great thing. Some of our, you know, our system installs, some historical issues that people may be aware of. One that I'm sure a lot of people are aware of right here on the corner of Bay Avenue and Peconic Bay Boulevard. Very simple problem. Water in the road. Tremendous amount of water in the road, okay? Park District had to install a recharge basin to handle their stormwater for their parking lots when they did this. It's a matter of getting a couple lawyers to talk to each other, granting an easement into that. We're able to put in 2 catch basins, 2-day job, problem gone, problem solved. Sunset and Daisy up in the Captain Kidd neighborhood off of Stanley Road. Speak to the neighbors there, 35 years. You say the word rain, foot of water in the road. To the point where these people have trenches trenched down the side of their property just to divert the water around their homes. Kind of step back, say what's the root cause, what's the problem here? Similar issue on Breakwater Road that we attended to. Poor soil type, non-drainage bearing material, drains basically just bathtubs. Revert back, we get a soil boring done, we determine exactly where the good drainage material is. Say, hey, we can't install this in-house. So we have an equipment contract with an excavating company. They come in by using a larger excavator, a larger crane. They're able to set a drain that works. We eliminate 2 long-standing flooding issues. And these are flooding issues where roads are completely impassable, private property being damaged. You know, looking at those as order of magnitude and how we're rank ordering these issues that we have to solve. So we've been able to chew through a good number of those over the past 2 years here. Similarly, recharge basins, I mentioned this one here. Saltair Way up in Mattituck this year, same sort of deal. Glacial till up in there, up in that area. Poor soil types, we do a soil boring, determine that the sump needs to go an additional 13 feet below the current bottom of the sump. That's why it never got the good material. This was a place that was a swamp, has been a swamp for the 40 years that it's been there. Bring the larger machine in there, dig it down, we get it. Now, a couple weeks ago, we saw it 3.5-inch rainfall in 3 hours. Within 6 hours, sump completely dry. People aren't living next to a swamp anymore. This is a recharge basin that's never worked before. Bray Avenue, we get heavy rains there. Small recharge basin alongside the road. Not quite what it needs to be. So we've started the process there. We've had that one surveyed. We know exactly where our meets and bounds are on that property. We have plans to expand that and put in a diffusion well in the middle of it, as well as redo a lot of the drainage on Bray Avenue, and then couple that into a future road paving project. Sidewalks. So the first sidewalk project that I took on under my tenure is right here on Bay Avenue. The idea behind this one, Bay Avenue sidewalks were a mess. Bay Avenue on the whole is a mess. We have National Grid to thank for that, and that's sort of the lead into the next and final point that I kind of want to just discuss before we open up for some questions. So that right-of-way that the town owns is 49.5 or 50 feet depending on the road. So that's the public space that we have to use. We have to construct whatever we want to construct. Utilities have that area available to them for construction. So those utilities are basically our partners, you know, in providing the services to the community. They get to use our land. We have a process known as a road opening permit that's administrated through the highway department. So National Grid decides we're going to do a gas main project. They have to give us a written plan of what they're looking to do, timeline, make sure the insurances are there, bonds, everything's in order. They send the drawings in, I review the drawings, say yes or no, that's okay. What's your methods of construction? So a project like that, new technology comes out, directional drilling. It's been out for a while. They've started adopting it more. Rather than doing an open trench, pipe it down the road, making a big mess, they can come in horizontally, directional drill. That's what you see, all those pits in the road. The sacrifice for that is surface condition, because now you have an 8x8 pit or a 6x6 pit that has, you know, anywhere between, let's say, 10 and 40 linear feet of cut around it. All that cut is a place for water to get in. All that excavated material is a different material than what's next to it underneath the roadbed. Now you have water introduced, and you have a freeze-thaw cycle going on, and you end up with nothing but a washboard to drive your car on. It's exactly what happened to Bay Avenue. Bay Avenue, you know, does not have great road base underneath it, I'll say. It has a lot of, you know, spongy type boggy material. You look at its proximity to the creeks there. We know this, we did a major rebuild of Riley Avenue my first year, where we regraded Riley Avenue, we addressed a lot of the underlying base issues, all the drainage issues. We know what that condition is under Bay Avenue. But going back to Bay Avenue, National Grid came in, they paid pennies on the dollar because they figured out we can do directional drilling. We're only gonna pay for our little bell holes that we put in the road, that's what they're called. And we're gonna go put this in, we're gonna wipe our hands and walk away, and we're gonna pay the town, let's say, $2,000 for a road opening permit. All they did was strap the taxpayers with a $200,000 resurfacing project that ultimately needs to be done. So what I've done is got all these utilities on board and said, look guys, this is not gonna happen anymore. You can directionally drill if you want, but if you're gonna put, you know, 3 bell holes within a 100-foot distance, you're giving us lane repaving money. We're not doing this bell hole stuff anymore. So early on in my first year, we decided Bay Avenue needs to be dealt with. It's really bad in the winter. In the summer, it's not so bad. In the winter time, it's really bad. Let's get the sidewalks done. We want to resurface this road. It has sidewalks alongside of it. ADA law says we need to attend the sidewalks, make them ADA compliant at the same time that we do the road surfacing project. Come and do our drainage work on that side and sidewalk side, get the sidewalks replaced. The plan was for last year to come in and finish the drainage work on the east side of Bay Avenue and then finish it off by resurfacing Bay Avenue. I go out the beginning of the spring and I tell National Grid, Suffolk County Water Authority, Cablevision, we're paving this road, it's hands off for 5 years, you guys aren't allowed to touch it. National Grid comes out of the dark and says, I'm sorry, we have more gas main replacement to do there. So the blessing there is that I did speak to them. We are speaking to them now. We have their roadmap forward of where they're looking to do work. So yes, it's unfortunate that that road paving project got pushed off a year because it should have been done last year. That was our plan. However, now we have a partner in that road paving project. They're going to be chipping in money to help us pave that road. We're going to get a better project out of it. And the best part about this agreement is they are going to cut the money directly to us rather than pay their contractor directly, which allows us to use our contractor, and it also allows us to be in control of when that road gets paved. All too often these utility companies, and you can see it if you just look closely when you drive around town, you'll see, wow, this is a really nice fresh paved road. Within 2, 6, a year, months maybe, you'll see a little depression starting to form. That's the trench where they did their work, or the hole where they did their work. Their thing is to pass the paper down the desk as quickly as possible. They want to get in and out of that project. They want to close it out. When you open up a road and you dig a hole, it needs time to recompact and resettle. And that's just the way it is. So, you know, if these utilities are willing to get on board these pave agreements to us, it's really in our best interest to allow that work to go in, allow it to settle for a year, get the proper compaction, and then, you know, a mill and pave can be done at that point. It's ultimately going to help us just increase the conditions of our roads tenfold. It's really a really good thing for us. And unfortunately, a lot of utility companies were kind of exploiting us for a number of years because this is something that's done common practice in the West. It just has never been done in this town for whatever reason. But I'm happy to say that that's definitely changing. So at that point, I don't know if anybody has anything in particular. They can show me the pictures of the trees that they don't like in front of their house, or the puddle, or whatever it may be.
Dan, do you have any jurisdiction at all on 25?
No, so 25 State Road, that's, the only thing that we can really do there are sidewalks. The terminology is maintenance of sidewalks. So what is maintenance versus replacement? This is something that we're kind of looking into from a legal aspect.
So along those lines, the stretch from, say, the library to the bend in the road on the south side of the road, that's just so hit and miss.
Yep.
Has anybody ever looked at making that consistent? Because what we have is the crosswalk in front of the library, which we're trying to get a stanchion from the state.
Right.
The fatality.
What I will say, and this is how you were in this meeting with Scott back in December, we were able to get a meeting through Senator Palumbo's office with Region 10 DOT.
Yeah, his office is right there.
Right, so we were able to get a meeting with the folks in Hopewell, Region 10, that oversee Suffolk County. And they are going to be doing what's called a warrant study in that location, basically starting in Handy Pantry and going to Reeve,
Okay.
just past the church. And they're going to be seeing about doing some flashing signalized crosswalk there potentially, as long as their study warrants it. That's the
If I
key.
could add to that.
Yep.
Yeah, the unsignalized crosswalk is a very dangerous
Yeah.
thing, and most of the traffic engineers do not
Right.
like them because, as a pedestrian, you see the signs and the striping on the road. As a driver, you're watching traffic, right?
Right.
And so it's not a good combination, especially where there's no intersection.
Yeah, on the whole, New York State will not, because there's been various requests, Charlie will attest to this, I'm sure, about, we need a crosswalk here. And the state comes back immediately and says, no, there's no signaling there, meaning a traffic light controlling that intersection.
Well, right in front of the town hall would be a perfect place for a crosswalk, but, okay.
Yeah, they prefer to put them at intersections where you have better vehicle control, you can put the buttons in and all that sort of thing.
By the way, thank you for getting rid of all the water in front of a few of our homes on Laurelwood Drive.
That was a maintenance, that was maintenance, that was simple maintenance. There
That was done by-
2.5 feet of silt in the bottom of those drains, so, to that end, the town drainage code is for 2 inches of rainfall over a 24-hour period. These last couple rainstorms that we've had, we're looking at 3.5 inches of rain, 4 inches of rain in a 2.5-hour period. That's a lot of water. I mean, even free-flowing pipes, we're having issues, dealing with that. And then you look at loose leaf litter and things like that on the road, and they just block them up. But, that was just a maintenance item that needed to be taken care of, so we got the water out of the road, and we were just down there last week in those drains. They should be in pretty good shape for a while now.
Thank you.
Yep.
With the potholes, what's your expectation? Is it up to the resident to call in, or use a service and check it out?
So this time of year, we try to have 2 pothole crews out every day, one covering east and one covering west. This is the worst possible time of year for potholes. Obviously, you have that freeze-thaw cycle. The cold patch does not stick very well at all. The water gets in underneath it, it freezes at night, it pops it out, and it's right back there again in the morning. What we're trying to do is keep tabs, and we're asking, the people going through these routes to say, hey, do you have one that's reoccurring? We're putting that on a short list. And then when we have availability to hot asphalt, it's in our plant in Speonk, which is typically open this time of year sporadically, like I said. We will put that on that list, and then we have a set amount that we can work with basically for that day. So if that means that we got to go there and, grind it out to a larger area to where it's a good stable spot and fix it and make a bigger area to repair it correctly, that's what we'll do. Or if it's just something that we got to get by until we get to the spring and we know that the road's going to be paved or whatever it may be. But like anything, if you guys see a pothole, just give us a call. And I have cards if anybody's interested in the office phone number. A lot of people already know the office phone number, 765-3140. Give us a call, and we try to get somebody out there within 24 hours, or either myself or my deputy will go look at it if it's a really bad one and make sure that somebody gets to it that day.
I got 3 quick questions. When the state comes into fix Love Lane, south end of Love Lane, is there any chance that they could just, while they have the paint out, they could just paint in a crosswalk between where the florist is and where the orthodontist building is? Since it is, the road actually intersects 2 existing sidewalks, which is rare enough to reduce.
So you're saying right at the mouth of Love Lane?
Yeah.
I suppose we could ask.
I-
The intersections are interesting because they control back into the intersection a bit. So that stop sign that's on Love Lane is their stop sign. And that crosswalk would be placed, sort of beyond that.
And, well, you said the state is willing to look at the idea of sidewalks with a need, as Jim said, from the library to the handy pantry. Could they be convinced to go additionally from the handy pantry to Bay Avenue, which is another area which is no fun at all to walk on?
Yeah.
And there are intermittent sidewalks there as well.
That's an area we could ask them to look at, They're pretty reluctant on taking care of the things that they have to take care of, so adding new things is a bit of a twist of the arm sometimes, unfortunately.
I do another question, but I just have to comment. Does DOT have something on us? Because
Us being Southold
picture
Town,
us
us as
somewhere or
taxpayers.
Southold Town that it's going to expose it.
No,
Because they just tell us what it is, and that's it.
Once a month, I get together with other highway superintendents in Suffolk County, and we all pretty much have the same exact experience with state DOT, unfortunately.
And John, I just drove to Farmingdale today with the police chief on business with the state troopers, and the roads there was a lot of potholes going to and fro, so it's not an uncommon experience with the DOT.
And, last question, you mentioned sidewalks in Bay Avenue and our partners, which that's frustrating. I'm kind of surprised to learn that sidewalks are in the highway department. Even though they adjoin, their priorities are entirely different. Does the town have I know it has a list of all the sidewalks, and in some of its reports in the past, it's, they're good here, they're not good there, and so on and so forth. Has the town prioritized what are the most dangerous, the most needed by some important criteria, so that money can be directed to that? Is there a system like that?
So the system right now with the funding that we have in place for sidewalks is essentially if we have, or we basically have one road a year that needs paving that also has a sidewalk alongside of it. So we can't pave the road until we attend to the sidewalk. So just to give everybody an order of magnitude, this sidewalk project on Bay Avenue was $238,000. Okay? Our sidewalk budget, annual sidewalk budget is $250,000.
So we're kind of like the street sweepers.
So it's one of those things where, and you look at Bay Avenue, it's a medium-sized road. It's not even a big road for us. That's over what the cost of the asphalt is for the road, if you look at it from that, standpoint. So it's a tough balance where, yeah, it'd be really great to do a sidewalk project here, but this road condition is really, really bad and we need to attend to it. So it's one of those things where it's kind of, and then we have, we did a sidewalk project in New Suffolk last year. So those sidewalks were really, really bad. I don't know if anybody had ever walked them prior to them being replaced. That's an area where they are getting no road paving because it's a concrete road. So last year we had a couple small sections of sidewalk on roads that we were paving, so we were able to do those small sections of sidewalks on those smaller roads and do a sidewalk project in New Suffolk and make that a better condition for them. So the funding is a really tough balancing act, you know, and just making that funding line up to where we can get the most bang for the buck, really, you know. The good thing about the sidewalk projects is that we piggyback off of a Suffolk County contract that they have for ADA compliance. So we sort of get built-in scale of service on the overall contract instead of putting out our own little minuscule bid and paying, you know, really high rates. So that's also good. It allows us to kind of bounce around a little bit and do little sections here and there because we basically pay for what we use linear footage-wise, not based on the size of the job. So it's just a balancing act, and it's a tough one, you know, and at the end of it, it comes down to the money.
Dan's question from Coleman. Old Sound Avenue going west of the railroad tracks, apparently the sidewalk is very overgrown.
So that area, we have other plans for, which I'm not going to necessarily divulge right now.
Okay. And
There was a new section of sidewalk put through there, sort of a reroute through the HRC parking lot. And that's another thing, we're looking at areas in town, it's not as prevalent on our town roads, but duplicate sidewalks, so a sidewalk on both sides of the road are those areas where we can eliminate sidewalk on one side and only do it on the other, because, let's face it, it just cuts the cost of the project quite literally in half and allows us to get to it sooner. And a lot of times, we don't have as much foot traffic, you know. When those sidewalks were put in, some of these were put in back in the 40s and 50s, labor and concrete was extremely cheap, and they were trying to get people to work, so it was, let's go put it down wherever we can. That's not the case anymore.
I noticed while I was up in Maine, on the rural roads, no lights, they seem to put that yellow line down the middle with a highly reflective paint, very luminescent. And I looked at, you did the lines near us, not too much, and they disappeared pretty quickly. I was wondering, is it cost effective to start to consider some of our rural roads to at least experiment if the costs were willing to put that very, very bright yellow line that stays a long time?
Yes. The paint that we put down has a refractory glass bead in it. So the paint goes down wet, a glass bead is air-blown into that right afterwards. They don't have great stick rates. Depending on the type of paint, you might have saw a different product, which is like a thermoplastic type product.
It was bright as could be, and I've been
So
there
that-
several times.
It may have been a hot applied product, which would be something where we would need to contract out and have somebody come in. The smaller local townships on Long Island, by and large, are not doing that. They're all, you know, either painting in-house with the same style of paint that we do, or contracting with a company to come in. The costs of it are pretty substantial.
Well, my thought is, maybe is it conceivable to experiment with that in certain areas, just to see, well, you know, look at our population, it's getting older and older.
Yeah.
And when it rains, you can hardly see the lines. So I'm thinking maybe you can experiment in certain
Yeah,
areas, even
it's-
if it were not as costly.
Yeah, it's definitely something, you know, we look into line painting, you know, our paint budget is, I think this year, $15,000 for road paint for the entire town. I know a town of East Hampton pays $1 per foot per line. So if you have a four-line road, you're $4 a linear foot. So they're spending on the order of about $85,000 a year to stripe, and they're not even striping their whole town. They're doing about a third of their town a year. So it is something we could take a look at, but it would definitely require, you know, a modification how the budget is sort of set up in order to start, you know, phasing that in.
Well, just something to think about,
Yeah,
in terms of,
absolutely.
you know, possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, there's a chance you can make or put slow bump in the street.
Like
And
a
signs.
speed bump?
Yeah,
So, speed bumps, we cannot do.
okay, who's doing that?
What's that?
Who's doing that?
That's New York State highway law,
Okay.
traffic law. There are other devices known as speed cushions, which are allowable. It's something that's been discussed, and our attorneys are kind of looking into what would need, if it would need to be a code change to allow them or not allow them. That's quite a controversial mechanism, though, to say the least.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, in spring, all the way to Labor Day weekend, my street personally, people drive at least 60 miles an hour. I'm not exaggerating. People are walking with dogs and something's going to happen. It's a matter of time. Somebody's going to get killed. Children on bicycle go
I mean,
there.
the best thing to do with speed-related complaints like that is to reach out to the police department.
Oh, I did.
They're the ones
I
that,
did.
you know, they have the enforcement. Unfortunately, I
did.
can't do any enforcement.
You know, they have other stuff to do. This is what they said.
Give Charlie your road name, we'll talk about it next month.
Okay.
This article that was in Suffolk Times in November, it says that Southold wins the AAA honors for traffic safety. I'm a deacon at the Unity Baptist Church on Factory Avenue, and I've been out here since 1955. Factory Avenue has changed from just a two-lane street to now it's a truck traffic, pedestrian traffic, with the building of the Mattituck homes, a lot of pedestrians, and also a lot of pedestrians coming back and forth, and now bicyclists, clubs of bicyclists. It says here the AAA said it has long recognized communities that make outstanding efforts to make the region's roads safer for motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. In our yearly budget request to Albany, can we get a request for a street safe, what they call it, the New York State law, Safe Streets Act, a study done on Factory Avenue, a request just for an engineering study for them to come down and do a safe street study for us on Factory Avenue.
I mean, that's something, that Factory Avenue has not been one that we've discussed in the Transportation Commission. It's definitely something we could take a look at. You know, there is sidewalk on a portion of it, so we could be looking at, you know, some sidewalk added to the north end of it, north of the tracks. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, you know, there may be a grant that's available that sort of would qualify potentially for like a multimodal type transportation system there to connect maybe the railroad station to the bus terminal to, you know, regular vehicle traffic, something like that. Yeah, it's something that we can definitely take a look at.
Well, during the summertime, when the light there at the corner, where the ice cream parlor is, when the traffic backs up all the way down to Love Lane,
Right.
on Sunday evening, the traffic, they come up Old Sound Avenue, and then they cut across Factory Avenue down to make that right going back to New York. And sometimes I've seen ambulances trying to get through on Factory Avenue for the traffic,
I believe that
and
the
the
timing,
trucks that back up going into the marketplace.
I believe that the timing of that light was looked at by New York State several years ago. But that's all I can kind of recall. That was quite a while ago. Because they control the timing of that light. That's not on the local township, unfortunately.
So we can't get a budget,
I don't think it's
an
really-
appeal for a study of that road?
I believe they did recent traffic counts, as recent as probably about a year ago.
Suffolk County Task Force.
Right. Yeah, the county did.
They did a study.
Yeah, they have traffic counts for those areas, and they did them at different times of the year to see what the effects of the seasonal traffic was.
Suffolk County Task Force did.
Right. Yeah, the county did.
They did a study.
Yeah, they have traffic counts for those areas, and they did them in different times of the year to see what the
I'll get
effects
some
of the
information
seasonal
for you.
traffic was.
I'll get some information for
Okay.
you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Since New York State is in charge of Route 25, we're the state police. You never see a state police officer or a program by them so that we can cut the speed down, because nobody pays attention to any sign. You can put one up in Spanish, you can put one up in Russian, nobody reads it in English. So, you know, they have to do something about that. It's not just, you know, our local police department.
Use kilometers.
We should probably move on.
Yeah, we have two more.
I was just wondering if does the town do anything with the railroad stations?
No, so those are LIRR property, that's completely on that. Yep.
I just want to say really quickly, thank you, Dan, so much for your time. We appreciate,
No problem.
you know, all your insight and everything. And just wondering if there's anything that we as the public and homeowners, if we can do to help you. What we can do to, the things we're asking about, you know, try to help and move forward with.
I mean, kind of, you know, to the point I made to Mr. McGreevy, you know, if you see something, just give us a call. You know, email is a good way to kind of correspond also, but, you know, we get a couple thousand requests annually. So sometimes that phone call is always, you know, a little bit of a more direct way to speak to somebody to make sure that something didn't end up in a spam folder or end up coming in. You know, a lot of times we get a storm event and it's not uncommon to have 150 emails in a day. So a follow-up phone call a couple days later is never such a bad thing, and I'm always more than willing to come out, and I'd rather see the problem, particularly if you're able to meet with me at any time, day or night, weekend, and show me exactly what's going on, because that's always the most direct way to make sure we're communicating about, you know, what the problem actually is versus what's kind of, you know, dictated through a complaint. So, yeah, that's about it, Bill. I mean, that's, you know, the more eyes, the better, and please, you know, I'm all ears, always open for feedback. I never want to be the smartest person in the room, so there's a lot of other better ideas out there, I'm sure, you know, with certain things. But I can always promise you I'll give you the right answer, and I'll give you a good expectation of what can or can't be done one way or another. So.
I'll be. Maybe not. I want to just recognize also a couple of other elected officials here. Bill Flinter's in the back here, and Ann Smith. And this is a great community because you've got your elected officials who take a great interest in, you know, in what the public's interested in. So I just want to go talk a little bit about, before I get into the emergency mapping, of what Dan said about all the work that they're doing, the highway department's doing, the town engineer's doing on the drainage. And a lot of the town drainage work started decades ago. And the reason the drainage started, is Dave Bergen's here, a former trustee, so he'd remember all those old days. You know, New York State controls the opening and closing of shellfish beds based on coliform bacteria. The major source of coliform bacteria is road runoff. And so we kind of attacked the drainage problems in town because of that. And Jim King, who was a former trustee, was in the office today. And, you know, he's telling me about the success in Mattituck Inlet, where 50 acres of, actually the whole inlet's open, he said now, seasonally. Instead, it used to be conditionally. If it rained a little bit, it would be closed for a week. And in the wintertime, it rains every week. So most of the time, the inlet was closed to shell fishing. Now you've got, because of all the road work that the town and the county have done, you've got a natural set of oysters in Mattituck Inlet that people are harvesting commercially. It's really a nice thing to see. And the water's clean enough to harvest them. So, but the other big benefit of doing all the drainage that Danny's doing, the highway department's doing, is that we're recharging the aquifer. You think of how many gallons of water fell out of the sky in the last month. And instead of that water going overboard, losing it all into the creeks and into the bay, all that water is recharging our aquifer, which is like money in the bank. So that's a big plus to what they're doing. Besides complying.
Too much complaining.
Enough complaining.
Well, I started the MS4 program. It's an unfunded state mandate, and it really is a lot of red tape and a lot of paperwork. And we're more interested in trying to clean up the waterways by doing the drainage and recharging the aquifer by doing the drainage. And instead, we have to spend a lot of resources and hours complying with the state mandate. So it's one of those places where the town and the state are frequently at odds. And a good thing we didn't bring the town engineer here to explain it. As far as the maintenance goes, this goes across everything townwide. And Dan certainly explained the maintenance issues that he's faced with. But it's the same townwide with any infrastructure. It's just a struggle to keep up with the buildings and to keep up with all the different infrastructure that we have, from Fish's Island all the way to Laurel. It is you need to be dedicated to do that. So when I first started the first week as town supervisor, I said, oh my gosh, we have all these flooding events, and they come from not only rainfall, but they also come from coastal storms. We need to do mapping of some of these roads, because you see the roads flooded from the creek and from the bay. You see the barricades put out by the highway department so people don't drive through them. Then you see the barricades moved by somebody so they can drive through them. And then the next car figures, well, the road must be open, the barricade's on the side, and everybody's driving through the salt water. We had our first meeting, and Don's going to talk about the emergency management committee that we have in town, which is really kind of inspiring, the work that they're doing. But what we're working on first is that we have a very good GIS man in Southold town. He's working up a map. We sat down with Danny, we sat down with the town engineer, and we marked up the map with the really known culprits of low spots during storm events. So we're doing that mapping so we have a good idea, because if you're a community that your access road gets flooded on a regular basis, you need to know, the fire departments need to know, the police department needs to know. People don't have to drive through the salt water. If there's a high emergency route, you can drive around somebody's neighborhood to get home. And so we're going to try to do a better job. We actually have a meeting set up with the fire chiefs and fire commissioners to try to coordinate with them, because we don't want people driving through this salt water. We don't want people driving, because at night in a storm event, if you're out there driving through water, you could end up in the creek very easily. Then you got to send the men and women out, in the police department and fire department, to try to save somebody and put them at risk. So we're trying to manage that from that standpoint. And then, as a county legislator, I work on this coastal resiliency plan, and it identified a lot of county-owned parcels that were at risk. And we're going to work on that now as a town-owned parcels that are at risk. And of course, on the roadways, a lot of those intersect. And we're going to start to look at the road elevations on some of these major roadways. Route 48 is one in particular. How do the local roads interact with that? And what's going to have to be done? If someone's going to start raising roads, you better do it in a coordinated fashion, because it's going to be very expensive, it's going to take a long time, and you don't want to start in the wrong spot, because you'll really never catch up. It's going to take decades to do some of this work. So that's kind of one of the big things that's kind of become a real priority after we've had those big storms. Everyone could see what floods and what a real public safety issue it is. So, does anybody have any questions about that? If not, I'm going to let Don go into the emergency management work, because there's a lot of very good partners that are working together, and it's really important work.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out this evening to hear us. Emergency management in the town of Southold was not always a thing. After World War II, it was Suffolk County that basically oversaw what we think of today as emergency management. That was the old civil defense. Some of you may remember the triangles and the blue circle with the CD. And the county supported the individual townships with training and equipment and volunteers from the towns would work up to the county, and that was our emergency management. That was a time when the county and the town of Southold and the East End was so much more simple. We didn't have so many people living here. We were farming potatoes and vegetables, and everyone knew each other. And everyone looked out for each other. Our fire departments had many, many volunteers in them. Our police department was very small, and actually, at that time, worked out of Dan's office today on Peconic Lane. It was a simpler time. And at that time, civil defense wasn't so much involved with the challenges of climate change and the storms that we're seeing come up the coast today, but they were looking at the Cold War, and if you could remember, some of you in the room, when it was duck and cover, trucks came around and showed us what a bomb shelter was like, and our parents were encouraged to build bomb shelters and be prepared to take us down into the basements. That was the 50s and the 60s. Now, as we have changed on the island, the expressway was built, more people came out and found us here, and this is a wonderful paradise. We don't blame anyone for wanting to be here. The pressures and the challenges have increased. We have more people living here. We have more people living along the bay and along the sound. So, in the 1980s, the mid-80s, 1985 to be exact, the county encouraged each of the townships to come up with an emergency plan for the people that lived in their towns. And we do have that plan, and periodically, every few years, it's upgraded and updated. And by the early 1990s, during the Tom Wickham administration, the Emergency Management Committee was formed. If you look at New York City, they actually have an EMO, or an Emergency Management Office. For us, we call it a committee. And on that committee, we have a highway department, because if the trees fall and the roads are flooded, our highway department has the equipment necessary to clear a road quickly to get emergency vehicles through. Of course, the police department's involved, and our police department's larger today and has more capacity and more resources to work with, so the police department is represented on our town committee since 1993. I'll go so far, being an ex-fire chief, our communities really look to our fire departments, the 7 departments in the town of Southold, starting with Fishers Island and coming to Mattituck. They're the greatest resource for emergencies that all of us have, whether we're having a heart attack or a tripped ankle, to a house fire, to a major disaster like a hurricane of 38 coming through. They have specialized equipment. They've had specialized training. Their resources are great in mutual aid. If Mattituck needs more help, Cutchogue and Jamesport are right there. That mutual aid system runs throughout Suffolk County. It's very important. And they have personnel. Of all of our groups, you heard what Danny had said by the number of people that he has to work with. And that covers the entire 17 or so miles of our peninsula. The police department. We've got more police officers today than we did back in the 50s and the 60s. But again, that limited number have to cover the entire 17 miles. Our fire departments in each hamlet and each community, with their resources and their equipment, have greater numbers to take care of us. In Mattituck Laurel, out in the Oyster Ponds, Greenport, Southold, Cutchogue, Fishers Island, East Marion. So, from the global emergency management committee that we've seen come up since the Tom Wickham administration. The fire departments really bring the most to the table. And they're prepared to respond quickly. So the fire departments are also represented by the coordinators at the committee. Human resources. Think of our fine adult senior citizen center here in Mattituck. We've had situations where they provided bologna and cheese sandwiches to the workers that were volunteering and actually working during the hurricanes. Specifically, this center here is a place where people who have health issues or during a bad storm need support can go as a special needs shelter. So they also sit on our committee. Ray Eberly from Eastern Long Island Hospital will come in specifically a lot of times when there's going to be a hurricane. He'll come to the committee because we're concerned with Eastern Long Island Hospital, with Sterling Creek. As the water rises, a lot of it comes up through the basement of the hospital or can intrude in. And we've had situations over the years where people have had to be moved out of the hospital to what's now Peconic Bay Medical Center or up to San Simeon because they can't stay in the facility because of the rising tides. So the hospital is represented from time to time at the committee. Now another component of this committee, which came on board in 1993, was communications. That's kind of like where I come in. I'm a coordinator for emergency communications. There are two of us on the committee, Charlie Burnham of Southold, myself. And our job is to provide a way to get information, calls for help out of our township, out of your community, to Albany, Washington, D.C., when everything else fails. Today, we depend a lot on our cell phones. It's been proven time after time after time that during a time of natural or man-made disasters, your cell phone service fails. So we may be here with all of our cell phones, but we can't call anybody. That goes for the police departments and the fire departments as well. So, from the committee standpoint, we look for other ways to communicate. How do we get help from the National Guard? How do we let people know at FEMA that the disaster has happened and this is where we're at and this is what we need? Well, one of the things that we can use is amateur radio communications. So in 1993, we were asked by the town, the Peconic Amateur Radio Club, to come on board the committee and provide communications specifically from the individual shelters where you might want or need to go during a terrific hurricane for your own safety. So we were asked first to be able to communicate from the shelters back to the Emergency Operations Center. And the town has an EOC, Emergency Operations Center. It's in the basement of the police headquarters in Peconic. And for a small town on the eastern end of Long Island, I'm pleased to say that our EOC is right up there with the county and the state EOCs in Hopog and in Yaphank. It's a room not quite as large as this, and when we're not using it for an emergency operations center, it's used for training of police officers. It's a kind of a classroom setup, and this is something that you don't get to see normally as a member of our Southold community. But to give you an idea, there are tables in there. Police use it for training. We use it for emergency management meetings. But during the height of the storm, each one of these areas can be set up with a computer at a table. We can have representatives from PSE&G, representatives from the other utilities, Cablevision, telephone. Suffolk County Water. They can be in there with telephones and communications to get out. And from that room, in the basement of police headquarters, the Emergency Management Committee can track and see what's going on. We have the 911 call center right upstairs. Information can flow up and down. And importantly, right across the hall in another room where we can kind of be quiet and handle communications going off the island, we have the EOC Communications Center. That's kind of my world and Charlie's world. And in there we have special radios, unlike the police radios or the fire radios that we think of, where we can talk great distances. We can talk around the world with amateur radio. Oh, do we have any licensed amateur radio operators in the room? Okay. We give classes and tests on that too. So, first off, our responsibility is to have secondary or tertiary communications from the shelters, where you may be, to that communications room. So we can know how many people are coming in, what the needs are of the people at the shelter, and then we can give that information right across the hall to the fire coordinators, the police representatives, PSE&G, and the other members of government and highway department in the EOC room proper. That information is coming in from the shelters. If we lose communications going off the island to the county, to the state, or to FEMA, requests from the EOC room can come across the hall to us, and we have our communication lines open to all over the world. So that's where I'm specifically from 1993. I continue with that to this day. We all remember Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Irene. I think those were some of the very, very first events where people like you from the outlying areas of the community wanted to get out of their homes and come to a refuge, a place of safety. We had shelters, and in the beginning we had the Oyster Ponds Elementary School, the Greenport High School, Southold High School, Cutchogue East Elementary, and Mattituck High School. But the storms were such, and we are a hardy lot. We want to stay home. How many people here want to leave and go to a shelter? I'm with you. I'm with you. But when it gets that bad, and possibly your neighborhood is inundated, it's been inundated with water from earlier storms. You know the challenges of what it is at your home. I facetiously, I mentioned it when I came in tonight. Yeah, I think we're up to the 8th or the 9th storm of the century in the last 2 months. I said that facetiously, first off, because I'm a little annoyed with social media and the weather. They turn these things into such hyped events, and we handle them pretty well. But on the other hand, we've heard what Dan said. You get 3 and 4 inches of rain in a few hours. It's not like it was in the 50s or the 60s or even the 90s. So there is a change in our weather patterns. You know now what it's like around your home. Some of you get flooding in your basements. You've got sump pumps. Some of you get flooding around your house. If you hear that a 38 style hurricane is coming, you know from your experiences with these small storms, this may not be the best place for me to stay. That's when you're going to think about taking your family, taking your friends, your pets, and coming to one of our shelters. So we had that for the first time. We had events like that with Hurricane Irene and with Hurricane Sandy. People had had enough experience. We've got to get out of here. We didn't go out and bring them in a bus. They got out of their homes before the storm hit, We had 50 or 60 people at Mattituck. We had about 124 people in the Greenport School. We probably had 30 or 40 people in oyster ponds. And what happened at oyster ponds, because there was so much damage to the infrastructure, there was no electricity afterwards. And you may not know, Suffolk County Water Authority doesn't go out to oyster ponds out to Orient. Everybody had their own pumps. They still have their own pumps. What they didn't have were generators. I can tell you from my work with the community out there since August, that's turned around almost. So many people have generators, which is good because they keep the water going. We had people in the Oyster Ponds Elementary School for 5 days, sleeping there. It's the only shelter in my 20-some-odd years that I've been doing this that we had that situation. And it's the only time that it's happened. But with our climate change, with what we're seeing with our storms, and the capacity for hurricanes coming up the coast, it could happen again. So, the committee made a subcommittee. Lloyd Reisenberg, Ms. Martinez, Jackie Martinez from Human Resources, and I sit on the shelter committee as a subcommittee of the overall larger emergency management committee. In 2015, we took our show and took it on the road, and we had some very successful classes and meetings from Oyster Ponds here to Mattituck. And we had classes on how people in the community, just as a volunteer fireman gets trained to do EMS, ambulance, and fire control, we brought people in who were volunteers from our communities, and we trained them in the art of being hosts to take care of their neighbors, their friends, if they had to come to a shelter. This is where I kind of wrap it up. It's been 9 years since 2015. And what we've experienced is over that time, people have sadly passed away, but also have aged and moved to other places. So our numbers, our ranks are down. And we're at a juncture today where the town emergency management committee, we want to restock. We want to find some new volunteers. So you'll be hearing about this from your civics board here. I've asked Charlie to come back sometime in the spring or the early summer. And I'm going to give you a slide presentation where we're going to talk about you being prepared at home. What you should be looking for, what you should have, because one of the thumbnails that we work with is we have no help coming from outside for 72 hours. So each of us in our homes has to be prepared to take care of ourselves. Think, the snowstorm's coming, we've got to go out and get the milk and bread, right? Well, this is kind of like milk and bread for the soul and the family. Things, and in my presentation, I'll teach you about that. We'll talk about some of these things you probably already know. But it's a primer to get you thinking about hurricane season that starts on June 1st. For you to be prepared for hurricane season through October 31st, November 1st, for yourselves, for your family. So that if we do get a storm and you do lose lights, you're prepared. And I hope I don't see it in my lifetime, but if we get a 38 hurricane storm that hits Long Island, some of you and your neighbors are going to want to go to the shelter. And we may be there for a few days. So it's important to have the skills, the knowledge that I'll give you in this little evening program, which is open to everybody, so that if we have that situation, a 38 kind of hurricane coming in, and you've got to grab out of the house, you're going to be prepared to take something with you. I'm not going to talk about it tonight because that's I'd be taking my fire away from that program. Like, I look at, Charlie's heard me talk before. You'll have something from my program that you're gonna take to that shelter with you. Now, here's my hook, and I'm gonna wrap this up for Q&A. At that little program that we're gonna do, I will give you a pitch, because I am looking for volunteers, and I'll give you that pitch that night. I'm looking for volunteers from Mattituck and Laurel area that would be willing to help out if we have to open up a shelter to our friends and neighbors and to ourselves. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself with that, but thank you for having us all here tonight. Thank you for hearing my little pitch, and Charlie's writing down notes there. I think you already talked to the board about having me come back, and I really do look forward to coming back and spending some time with you. Do you have any questions and answers about emergency management?
I do have one thing.
Yes.
Don, and thank you very much for that presentation too.
Thank you.
You know, we're here on the East End, and if there's a mass evacuation, there's only one way we go, and it's west.
Yeah.
Where other
That's right.
areas go north, south, you
Yeah,
know,
we only have one way.
east, they can really branch out 360, you know, and here we only have one way out. Has anybody figured out, if God forbid there is any kind of an emergency, how we, is that?
No, let me honest with you, no.
And a boat, that's it.
And again, we go back to the fact that, you know, our population has increased. We have so many more people here, and if we have a disaster, and we talk about hurricanes, but one of the events that I have worked on for many years is a nuclear explosion from the plant over in New London. Well, as long as we have our sustained southwesterly winds, and in the wintertime our northwesterly winds, we're in pretty good shape. And this is the sort of thing Ms. McGreevy brings to my mind about a mass evacuation. Because it could be a beautiful sunny day. No rain, no wind per se, no storm. But if we get an alert that there's a serious problem with that plant, for instance, and the wind is coming our way, people are going to want to get up and run. And you're right. We've got Sound Avenue and we have the main road, and we're all going to be trying to get down that road. You've probably seen the pictures of what it's like down in Florida and the Carolinas when they have a forced evacuation. So, part of the education I'm going to give you in that little program that I have is how to prepare to shelter in place. Because for most of us, sheltering at home in place is where we're going to be the most comfortable. It's where we're going to be the safest. Even a large hurricane. But those of you who know the lay of your land in your neighborhood, and as Al has said, the flooding problems with the roads, there may come a time we're going to have to call up through the red telephone system where all of your cell phones and we have that in town. You're going to listen to WLNG, you're going to watch News 12. We may have forced evacuations from some areas relative to what comes up with what I call the slosh maps. You're going to have to go to shelter. Hopefully you won't. So the best thing is you shelter in place. You stay home. Because if you get out on the road, you're fully exposed and you're in that mob scene. As I stand here tonight, there's no easy way out. You know, we used to joke about the idea, well, you know, if you have a boat, it's in the water, you get in the boat.
And you go.
And you go.
Right.
You know, head for Gardener's Island or whatever, but that's almost facetious and comical. So it's your best to shelter at home. That's the first thing you want to do. So you want to be prepared. Those are the things I'll bring to you when we speak again. And then ultimately, we have to be prepared for the shelters Because if you do have that bad hurricane, and we do have to evacuate people, and you feel you gotta get out, we have to have the schools and those places open and staffed with volunteers. Just like the fire department, we need those resources.
And to Don's point about getting out, you don't have to wait till the last minute. And if you think about Sandy, if you think about the Halloween storm, the perfect storm in the 90s, and then the New Year, the Christmas Eve storm, there were a lot of seasonal residents who weren't here, and their homes got flooded, but they weren't living here. So it was bad, but they weren't actually here. So if you know that there's a big storm coming, and I think that's gonna be part of the conversation, I'm gonna try to encourage people to say, okay, this storm might hit Eastern Long Island, it might be bad. You should have a plan in place that maybe you could go to a relative somewhere else, somewhere off the island, not wait till the storm's kind of barreling down. So I think that's gonna be part of that mindset of getting out of harm's way. Because we're in the way, nature's gonna come through, we're just kind of here in the way.
Yeah, it's important to know that, the committee will meet, if we're looking at something that's gonna be really, really serious, we're gonna be looking at meeting, a week in advance, and then regularly, almost daily thereafter, as we get updates and things of that nature. Kind of to just add on both those points, we don't have a crystal ball of the weather. That's something that was pretty funny that I've learned in the last 2 years. Everybody thinks that, oh, you're the highway guy, you must know if we're getting snow or not. I know exactly what you guys know.
And yet I still call them.
So my point is, I think when the committee, if we decide, hey, this is something we need to start urging people to leave, like, if we're saying, hey, you guys might want to think about getting out, take that kind of seriously and consider doing that sooner than later. It's always better to err on the side of caution.
How are you gonna put that out there?
So communicate through the town website.
Yeah.
Like Don said, we have RAVE and the all-call system where it can hit, a block of any cell phone that's connected to a tower in an area, social media, radio, however, variable message board signs. I mean, you know what I mean? Back in the day, they used to go around with the PA system on cars and,
Yeah.
this is the deal, so.
But people know when it's coming too,
Right.
so you kind of have to be, to Don's point, you kind of have to be prepared
And-
and be trained to say, okay, I need this much food,
It's-
I need these clothes, if I'm gonna go stay somewhere else, or if I'm gonna call it closer, then decide to go to a shelter, you kind of have to be prepared on
I mean,
your own.
the situation nobody wants is for somebody to decide to stay and then need help when it's too late to get help there. And that situation has already happened in Orient at least one time, and other places where homes completely flooded. These people are going to the second story of the house, and they're calling for the fire department to come there and get them out of there. That's a problem. So we need to really, hopefully bringing this to the table when we don't have something barreling down on us, we'll just get everybody thinking a little bit about it and saying, you know what, I really do need to make some alternate plans here for, hopefully this never happens, but if this should, have the potential to happen.
Sorry, Don, can I just ask really quick, I know, there's a lot of dependence on local fire departments and EMT. Is there any way we can, because I know enrollment is way down, is there any way we can try to get, that enrollment up? How can we address that?
Tough question, I know, I'm sorry.
Well, our culture and our times have changed. I remember when I was employed and I was working, we did a lot of recruitment in the Southold School District for the Southold Fire Department. Because between the custodians, some of the teachers, and myself, we had 7 or 8 firefighters who were in the building every day. Also back in the earlier days, we had things like the racing team, which attracted the young athletes from the basketball and the baseball and football and so forth. For whatever reason, and each one of our fire departments had that. It seemed as if years ago, when I was very active with that, before these things came along, you could attract young people without breaking their arms. Now, the state of New York, we've created the retirement system for retention, to keep people in, and to try to encourage people to join the fire departments, because after you turn 55 or 60, I'm not sure exactly what the age was, because I had moved on to emergency management, so I wasn't in that, but it was done so that if you stayed in your volunteer fire service for so many years, when you turned a certain age, you actually get a retirement. And they're expanding that at the state level with the legislature, and I know that there's some, there's a law going through the Senate and the Assembly right now that will allow specifically volunteer fire departments and emergency medical, EMS, encouraging them and telling school districts they have the right to come in and give presentations to try to get people to join the fire department. And then with these programs, the retention rate hopefully will be up. I think collectively throughout the state and the county, there are advertisements, there is a concerted effort to get people. But we're up against 2 and 3 jobs. We're up against these things. I don't know, somewhere lost, it's not cool to be a fireman anymore, but I don't have a specific answer. They're trying. If you have someone young in your family, talk to them when you go home about, hey, have you ever thought about joining the Mattituck Fire Department? You know, I mean, for me, there were wonderful opportunities. EMT classes, the training that I learned in the 70s and the 80s through the fire service classes, I still use those skills today at the Railroad Museum and at home. So if you have young people, whether they're your own children, your grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and it's for guys and gals, encourage them to look at it. It's a great social atmosphere, as well as you're doing great stuff for the community. Thank you.
Don?
Yes, sir.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's been a lot of years. I remember Don when we were in high school. As part of the...
I had hair then, didn't I?
Yeah. As part of the ERP, the business continuity plan, in other words, bringing facilities back up into operation once they're lost for one reason or another, are we in good shape with that in Southold Town with all of our major facilities? You mentioned the hospital, I'm thinking the schools and town hall and our town employees, our highway department. Are we in good shape with that?
I'm going to be honest with you. The Emergency Management Committee, for the most part, deals with the approach of the disaster and more importantly, when disaster happens. I honestly can't say since 1993 that we have, as a committee, looked at the individual economic factors to come back up. I can say from observation, if we get hit really hard, it's not just Southold Town that is going to be behind an 8 ball. East Hampton, Southampton, Riverhead, Shelter Island, and the rest of Suffolk County is going to be in the same economic deprived position. And it will be a struggle to come back up to the way we know it today. When we look at 9/11, that was a man-made disaster. And forget about the terrorists and getting into the politics side of it. You devastated a huge area of land, businesses, infrastructure, everything from Con Ed distribution centers to Verizon centers that handled telephones, and it took years to come back from that. Now, the onus, the drive, and the responsibility to bring that infrastructure back up, it's private business. Verizon's going to have to come back in and build up its cell towers. It's not going to happen in like 3 days. If a cell tower goes down in a bad storm, or we've had some kind of a man-made disaster, and several cell towers have gone down. The town of Southold, we're not in a position to really push away. You say, hey, we need them back as soon as possible. But remember, everybody else is saying the same thing. We have to be patient. As Dan said, you know, you got 400 miles, and you get X number of snowplows. It may be a while, and if it's coming down at 2 or 3 inches per hour, it's gonna look pretty bad, but we're coming. Well, that's where we're at, Dave, with the after effects. And it's hard to say, yes, we're gonna be able to pop back up with our government and our subdivision facilities. It's hard to look in that crystal ball with the fire departments, the school districts, our taxing areas that we think of as quasi-governmental, and they should be prepared to bounce back up. Depending on the storm and depending upon the locus of where the damage is or what the damage is, it's a crapshoot. We may do very well. But when it comes to electrical infrastructure, we are waiting for those crews to come in from around the country to work for PSE&G, LIPA, and get us back up. And if they have to put up 1,000 telephone poles, each pole, think about outside your neighborhood, car hits the pole. We've all seen how long it takes to get the crew out, survey. Well, if you have 1,000 poles down, we're going to have to be patient. And no, short answer, no, there's no way that we could really say that we're in good shape. I can tell you that, and again, this was state law after Sandy, any brand new service gas station that comes up has to have a generator. And many of the gas stations have retrofitted generators, so hopefully we'll have gasoline, whatever's in the ground. And hopefully we can get a tanker out. Many of our supermarkets, like IGA and Southold, after that, they've put in generators to keep the refrigeration units going, if not the whole store. So I think the bright side answer to your question is we're better today than we were 15 years ago. But again, it's a crystal ball. What infrastructure was destroyed? Whose infrastructure was it? And the committee really can't do a whole lot to bring it back up.
Well, I did this as part of my role at the Suffolk Community College, so if you need any help with it, I'd be glad to help the town.
You did it for the college, yeah.
Yes, emergency management, and included in that was business continuity plan.
Okay,
So-
but your prime example to what I was saying, the college was proactive, you had your committee and you did that. But you were basically dealing with Brentwood, Selden, and the Eastman campus, right?
Correct.
You weren't too concerned about, well, you were downtown Riverhead.
I was gonna say,
You were
wrong, because we were, I'm sorry, but we were the county's designated evacuation center, so.
Yes.
Yes,
You had to
we had to be
come back
ready
up.
for East End people to come to our place
That's right.
in the event of a disaster.
That's
So,
right.
Yeah, it was major.
But you were focusing on your properties. You were focusing on your
Business
properties.
continuity
Yes.
plan was focused on our properties.
Yep.
But it was part of the ERP because we were at a responsibility throughout the
Because
county.
we were gonna phone people, so it was very important for you to be able to get back up and get your operation going.
Correct, the buildings had to be up and running. Anyway, if you'd like some
I think
help
getting,
and advice,
you know,
I'd be glad to.
going, it's sort of unfortunate that we're the size that we are, that might make it, that we're a little bit of a smaller issue in relation to some of the bigger issues that these utilities would have to deal with. But to our advantage in that is that we're able to be very organized, and we can make things quite comfortable for some of these utilities to spend their time with us. So I know when we have approaching storms, even wind events, you know, PSEG will send out an email to all the local municipal contracts on Long Island in general, let's say. And there's typically always 3 people on that. I'll always respond back to those 3 top guys that are on that email and say, hey, if you guys have crews that are out, you need a yard to stage in, our facilities are open for you. There's bathrooms, there's showers, there's this, there's coffee, whatever you guys need. And sometimes we're able to get them to come and stage in our yard in Peconic. And, you know, I think that little bit of outreach gives us a little bit of advantage. this last storm that came through, we offered it to them, and they said, yeah, thanks, you guys are the only ones that reached out, but we're gonna run 3 crews, we're gonna stage them in our Riverhead location, that way we can cover north or south, wherever the issues come in first. But just that little bit of organization, that framework that we have, if we can outreach to them and maybe, get to them before anybody else does, might be a little bit of a competitive advantage for us,
Just-
so.
Very quickly, Hurricane Andrew, when it hit South Florida and wiped out South Florida, the University of Miami said, we are open to all utility crews for our housing and food service. Guess what got up and running? The University of Miami was up and running in 3 days after Hurricane Andrew. So, yeah, to your point.